In 1988, a South African artillery crew set up their gun in the Angolan bush in under 2 minutes. The gun was a 155mm howitzer capable of firing a shell 39 kilometers. They fired, then they moved. Within 90 seconds of the first shot, the vehicle was already driving away at 90 kilometers per hour. The Angolan artillery battery that attempted to counter-battery them was still calculating the firing solution when the South Africans were already 5 kilometers gone. That was not a tracked self-propelled gun. No tracked vehicle can move at 90 kilometers per hour. That was the G6 Rhino, the world's first wheeled self-propelled howitzer, a 155mm artillery piece mounted on a 6-wheeled armored truck that could drive itself to the battlefield, shoot, and disappear before the enemy could respond. Nobody had ever built anything like it. South Africa built it under a mandatory United Nations arms embargo, and it changed artillery warfare forever. To understand why South Africa built the G6, you need to understand what the South African Defence Force was doing in Angola in the 1980s. SADF operations in Angola were not conventional warfare in any NATO sense. There were no front lines, no fixed positions, no logistics depots within range of a towed gun. South African battle groups operated hundreds of kilometers inside Angola, supported only by what they could carry with them. The SADF's existing self-propelled artillery, the G5 155mm towed howitzer, was excellent. It outranged everything the Angolan army and its Cuban advisors fielded. But towing a gun into Angola required a truck. The truck needed a road. Roads were either mined or didn't exist. And a towed gun was slow. Setting up took time. Moving took time. In an environment where Soviet-advised counter-battery radar was tracking shell trajectories and Soviet-supplied BM-21 Grad multiple rocket launchers could blanket a position within minutes of the first shot, time was measured in lives. The SADF needed a gun that could deploy without roads, fire without setting up, and leave without being caught. They needed artillery on wheels. The design brief that produced the G6 went to the South African Armaments Corporation, Armscor, in the early 1980s. The requirement was specific and the constraints were severe. The gun had to fire the same 155mm ammunition as the G5. Maximum range had to exceed 30 kilometers with standard ammunition and reach 39 kilometers with base bleed extended range rounds. The vehicle had to be self-propelled with no external prime mover. It had to cross the terrain of southern Angola and northern Namibia without road support. It had to be capable of sustained cross-country movement at speeds that gave it tactical mobility beyond any tracked gun. And it had to be developed without importing a single military component because the embargo made every foreign military item unavailable. The engineers at Armscor solved the problem by accepting a compromise that no other artillery design had ever made. They put the gun on wheels. Not because wheels were better than tracks for an artillery vehicle. In many environments they were not. Because wheels were faster. Because wheels needed less maintenance. Because wheels could achieve road speeds that no tracked vehicle could match. And because in southern Angola, where the terrain was largely firm sand and gravel and laterite hardpan, wheels worked as well as tracks and cost far less to operate. The hull was a 6-wheeled design derived from the SAML truck family, South Africa's standard military logistics vehicle. Using SAML components solved the embargo problem. The SAML was manufactured domestically from commercial components. Its drivetrain, engine, and running gear were available without foreign sourcing. The engine was a turbocharged diesel producing 390 horsepower, driving all 6 wheels through a fully automatic transmission. Maximum road speed was 90 kilometers per hour. Cross-country speed was 30 kilometers per hour. Range was 700 kilometers. The gun itself was the G5's 155mm 45 caliber barrel, mounted in a fully enclosed rotating turret with an automated loading system. The automated loader allowed a crew of 6 to maintain a rate of fire of 3 rounds per minute sustained, with burst rates higher than that for short periods. The turret rotated a full 360 degrees. The gun elevated from -5 degrees to +75 degrees. The vehicle could engage targets in any direction without repositioning. Most critically, the gun could be brought into action in 2 minutes from a road march, and the vehicle could be moving again within 90 seconds of the last shot. Shoot and scoot, the artillery equivalent of what the Rocket was doing with tank guns on the same battlefield. The G6 entered South African service in 1988. Its combat debut was immediate. SATUF artillery units equipped with G6s deployed to the Angolan operational area and used the vehicle exactly as designed. Fire a battery of rounds, move, fire again from a different position, move again. The combination of 39-kilometer range and 90-kilometer-per-hour road speed created a tactical problem for Soviet-advised Angolan and Cuban forces that they had no effective answer to. The G6's range exceeded that of the BM-21 Grad multiple rocket launcher that had been the primary threat to South African artillery. A G6 battery could engage Grad positions from distances where the Grad could not respond. The G6's mobility exceeded that of every tracked self-propelled gun in the Angolan inventory. By the time counter-battery radar had computed a firing solution and Angolan artillery had responded, the G6 was gone. One G6 crew in 1988 fired a total of 42 rounds from 6 different positions in a single engagement. The opposing artillery never managed a round within 2 kilometers of any G6 firing position. 42 rounds, 6 positions, 0 losses. That was the G6. The vehicle's post-war export success was built entirely on its combat reputation. Oman purchased G6s for operations in terrain, broadly similar to southern Angola. The United Arab Emirates ordered a substantial fleet that became a reference export for South African artillery technology. When the First Gulf War began in 1991, the UAE's G6s were among the most capable self-propelled howitzers in the coalition's allied component. South Africa demonstrated the G6 extensively to potential customers throughout the 1990s. The NATO comparison was stark. The American M109 Paladin, the standard Western self-propelled gun, weighed 28 tons on tracks and could reach 56 kilometers per hour on roads. The British AS-90 weighed 45 tons and reached 53 kilometers per hour. The G6 weighed 47 tons, but reached 90 kilometers per hour. That road speed difference translated into a shoot and scoot capability that no tracked gun could match. The M109 and AS-90, after firing, needed several minutes to pack up and move. Their tracked speed limited how far they could travel in that time before incoming counter-battery fire arrived. The G6 needed 90 seconds. Then it was moving at 90 kilometers per hour. By the time a counter-battery round landed on the G6's last firing position, the vehicle was up to 2 kilometers away. Ukraine changed the G6's story one more time. When the war began in 2022, Ukraine requested every type of artillery Western nations could provide. South Africa, in a politically complex decision given its historical relationships, did not send G6s directly to Ukraine. But the UAE's G6 fleet, partially transferred to Ukrainian allied networks, and the broader influence of G6 technology on Ukraine's artillery needs kept the vehicle relevant to the conflict. More significantly, the Russian experience of fighting against wheeled self-propelled artillery in Ukraine, particularly the French Caesar 15 5mm wheeled howitzer that directly descended from the G6 concept, validated every tactical argument South Africa had made in Angola 30 years earlier. The Caesar was the G6's direct intellectual descendant. When French engineers designed the Caesar in the 1990s, they studied the G6 extensively. The concept of mounting a 155mm gun on a wheeled truck rather than tracked hull was South African. The shoot and scoot tactics that made wheeled artillery effective were developed in Angola. The Caesar in Ukraine moved faster than Russian counter-battery radar could track. It fired and disappeared before response artillery could arrive. Ukrainian crews credited it with extraordinary survivability. That survivability traced directly back to engineers in South Africa in the early 1980s who had decided, under embargo and operational necessity, to put their artillery on wheels. The G6 Rhino had been the first. Everything that followed, from the Caesar to every wheeled howitzer program in development across NATO today, descended from the same decision. South Africa could not buy the military technology it needed, so it invented the technology that everyone else would eventually need. 6 wheels, 155mm gun, 39 kilometers, 90 seconds to move. The Rhino.